Welcome to the chaos sector. We return to the Matrix. Let's just go back over something very important because it was swept under the rug. Interesting about that phrase because maybe baggies have been swept under rugs in the past. Partying, living the Hollywood tragic life, doing lines of blow with escorts, drunken, drugged-up zombies, just embarrassing his family on a national scale. Listen, we all know how difficult a drug addiction can be. But for those who have the financial capabilities to overcome those addictions, we have less remorse. For those who are homeless or in lower class environments, it's far harder to overcome drug addictions. Wealthy individuals have more access to the most sophisticated rehabilitation services, and in most cases, they even have special treatment specifically for them. Their money allows them to receive this special treatment. And that's the point here, special treatment. Yeah, powder nose. I'm going to stay on that for a moment if you guys don't mind. Hunter was found guilty on 3 felony charges stemming from a 2018 purchase of a handgun while he was struggling with his drug addiction. Now, the gun laws, of course, prohibit anyone with a drug addiction from being able to purchase a firearm. So, he of course lied on the application. But more so, why did Hunter even need that firearm? Could it be trouble with the drug dealers? Seems about right. He is facing 25 years in prison. But more than likely it won't be that much. But he also was charged with tax evasion. Go figure, hey. Now, once again, a drug addiction is a personal struggle that many can't overcome. But when dealing with individuals who essentially are shielded by their parents, that being a father who is a politician and currently the president, there's this sense of entitlement Hunter has always had. We all know the type. The wealthy son who thinks he can just run around and do whatever he wants and simply gets a slap on the wrist. Apparently, Powder Nose has become some sort of consultant in Old Joe's administration. Interesting enough, after the Biden's family trip to Camp David, Powder Nose is lingering around at the White House all of a sudden. Hunter has joined meetings with his father and top aides since they returned to the White House from Camp David. In addition, he has allegedly been talking to senior White House staff members as well. Now, why is he all of a sudden lurking around the White House? It's simple. He's got himself in a heap of trouble and is looking for Daddy to help him out. And of course, Old Joe claimed that he would not be pardoning his son amidst his recent charges. But here's the real problem. Those recent charges are simply a smokescreen of the bigger criminal charges Powder Nose evaded, and his father as well. One word. Burisma. Yeah, Burisma is a Ukrainian energy company that Powder Nose was a board member of. Why was an American attorney and businessman on that board? Well, let's find out.
Quote, during his time on the board of one of Ukraine's largest natural gas companies, Hunter Biden was regarded as a helpful non-executive director with a powerful name, according to people familiar with Biden's role at the company. Interviews with more than a dozen people, including executives and former prosecutors in Ukraine, paint a picture of a director who provided advice on legal issues, corporate finance, and strategy during a 5-year term on the board, which ended in April of this year, which would have been in 2019. So Hunter became a board member in 2014 during the Obama administration, and Old Joe was the vice president. Keep this in mind. Hunter never visited Ukraine for company business during that time, according to 3 people. They also said that his presence on the board didn't protect the company from its most serious challenge. These challenges were a series of criminal investigations launched by Ukrainian authorities against its owner, Mykola Zlochevsky, a multimillionaire former minister of ecology and natural resources. The allegations concern tax violations, money laundering, and licenses given to Burisma during the period where Zlochevsky was a minister. Revelations in a whistleblower complaint that Trump and his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, pressed the Ukrainians to pursue investigations into Burisma and the role of Hunter Biden have sparked an impeachment inquiry by Democrats in the House of Representatives. Trump faces allegations that he withheld U.S. military assistance for Ukraine to place pressure on Kiev to investigate his potential Democratic rival in next year's U.S. presidential election. Giuliani has alleged, without providing evidence, that Joe Biden pushed for the firing of Ukraine's top prosecutor to end an investigation into Burisma and Zlochevsky in order to protect his son. Hunter has denied wrongdoing, and in a public statement on October 13th, his lawyer George Messiers said, quote, despite extensive scrutiny, at no time has any law enforcement agency, either domestic or foreign, alleged that Hunter engaged in wrongdoing at any point during his 5-year term, unquote. Now, briefly, when you're dealing with corruption, especially on a global political scale, there is not much merit in what someone claims. It doesn't matter if you have 10 former employees at Burisma, senior executives, staff members, all claiming Powder Nose didn't commit any criminal activity. This does not have much merit, to be honest, because obviously there is a cover-up. We exposed it already. Remember, there was a series of criminal investigations by the Ukrainian authorities against the owner of Burisma. So with that already being established, it's likely that Powder Nose is at the center of that criminal investigation. But to protect the truth from coming out, it's strategic to make it appear he never committed any crimes. Because if he were found guilty committing crimes with that company, which by the way are similar crimes Powder Nose has been charged with, tax violations and even money laundering and licensing violations, well, it would expose the global pipeline of political corruption between the United States and foreign governments. And since Old Joe knew about this, he would also be connected. After all, Old Joe allegedly was granted a percentage of Powder Nose's cut in that criminal activity. Trump called him out about this in the previous presidential debate. But let's continue. Quote, in an interview with ABC News, Hunter Biden said in retrospect, it may have been poor judgment to join Burisma's board while his father was vice president. In that interview, Hunter added that he didn't discuss business dealings with Ukraine with his father other than a brief exchange, in which his father told him, quote, I hope you know what you're doing, unquote. Now we have to stop once again. Powder Nose is a liar. He lied on an application for the purchase of a firearm, which is a serious crime. He was charged with tax evasion. So where is the integrity? Also, just in general, being a board member of a foreign energy company would prompt any son or daughter to consult with and have general business discussions with their parents, especially if that parent is a politician. Come on, you're not fooling anyone. He spoke to his father perhaps all the time about his business with Burisma. It's obvious. So that's a flat-out lie. Also, for him to claim his father told him, quote, I hope you know what you're doing. Doesn't this indicate Old Joe was concerned about his relations with that foreign company and being a board member? Of course. So once again, there would be private meetings between Powder Nose and Old Joe about Burisma. Anywho. Quote, Joe Biden also denied any wrongdoing, saying he called for the removal of then Chief Prosecutor Viktor Shokin in 2016 because of his ineffectiveness in tackling corruption in Ukraine, a widespread problem that both the United States and the European Union had long highlighted. Unquote. We'll leave it right here for now. Now let's distinguish something briefly. Hunter Biden was addicted, or is still addicted to, crack cocaine, and that is far more devastating than cocaine alone. The question then raised here is, was Hunter smoking crack while a board member of Burisma? Well, his brother passed away in 2015 of brain cancer, and he claimed that's when he spiraled out of control. But he was already dealing with substance abuse prior to that passing, as he was kicked out of the Navy Reserve after failing a drug test. So, let's be honest here. Burisma had a board member who was a crackhead. I know it stings a bit, but that's the brutal truth. Who knows? Many of those board members could have been on drugs. Wouldn't put it past them whatsoever. So if you have a crackhead as a board member of Burisma, that company is then investigated for tax violations, money laundering, and licensing violations. It's safe to say that someone addicted to crack cocaine had their hands in the middle of this criminal activity. The brutal truth here, individuals addicted to crack cocaine become a bit savage as they scavenge for the funds necessary to pay for their addiction. It doesn't matter what economic bracket they would be in, the scavenging aspect applies to even the wealthiest of crackheads. And of course, soon enough, if they are not careful, that wealth will be depleted in a few years. And since Hunter was an attorney and businessman, surely he had a few tricks up his sleeve that Zlochevsky deemed beneficial to the company. And I believe Old Joe oversaw his business dealings with Zlochevsky and Burisma because he knew Hunter was not, all there. Remember, Hunter claimed that Old Joe told him, quote, I hope you know what you're doing, unquote. This translates to, son, you're addicted to crack cocaine, you need help. This is a great business opportunity, and I can't tell you what path to take, but I hope you're strong enough to fight for your success. And Trump pointed this out in their previous debates, where Old Joe was the primary benefactor of the money Hunter made. Somewhat of a trust fund, where he managed his money because he knew Hunter would smoke it all away. What do you guys think? Does it add up? It's logical. It's simple. Burisma was under investigation for tax violations, money laundering, and licensing violations during the time Powdernose was a board member. And guess who was overseeing Ukraine policy during the Obama administration? Well, look there. None other than Old Joe. Well, isn't that a coincidence? Furthermore, Old Joe claimed he didn't pressure the Ukrainian government to fire the prosecutor in the investigation into the Burisma criminal activity. That prosecutor, forgive me if the name is not pronounced correctly, but Kostiantyn Kulik was fired because he, quote, failed to take a professional exam that Prosecutor General's office had required as part of an effort to remake the law enforcement body, unquote. Translation: let's get this guy out of here before the criminal pipeline of money laundering, tax violations, and licensing violations comes back to Powdernose. Keep in mind, that investigation didn't come about until the timeframe Powdernose was on that board. Another eerie coincidence, right? Powdernose was paid a considerable amount of money, which could have been generated through all of the money laundering, tax violations, and licensing violations. And since his father oversaw foreign policies with Ukraine, of course he received a large cut as well. And to sweep it all under the rug, Kostiantyn was fired as the lead prosecutor to prevent the truth of the criminal pipeline between Old Joe, Powdernose, and Mykola Zlochevsky being revealed. And that would have severely hurt Old Joe in the 2020 presidential election. Oh, but hey, many people came out and claimed there was no wrongdoing by Powdernose while a board member for Burisma. Oh, there was no wrongdoing by Old Joe neither? Listen, the best way to cover criminal activity up is to deny it ever happened. People do it all the time, in such a casual manner on top of that, as if it's preposterous to assume they could do such a thing, and then it comes out they did in fact commit those crimes. But what do you expect with corrupt politicians? Fast forward, Ukraine is at war with Russia, a big distraction that the United States is covertly paying off to keep everything a secret. And that war happened during Old Joe's administration, and he oversaw Ukrainian policy as vice president in the Obama administration. Any genuine citizen who claims to be politically educated and sincere would conclude that Old Joe is just another corrupt politician. Some on the left will counter and claim that Trump has been charged and convicted. He also evaded paying taxes, tried to overthrow the result of the 2020 presidential election with encouraging an insurrection, and even has been alleged to literally assassinate his political opponent due to being a threat to national security. Well, I would say that the only thing he may have done is in fact evaded paying taxes. But that was explained in that presidential debate. There are loopholes in the tax system that allowed him to even do so. Second, the results of the 2020 presidential election is always going to be a subjective issue. If there was cheating in the election, a presidential candidate does have the right to investigate it, and simply put, can reject the results. But here's the thing, some have come out and stated that if there was cheating, it wasn't at the level of having an impact on the results of the election. So you indirectly admit there was cheating, but it wasn't at the level of impacting the results of the election. Now, how can you determine that? Wherever the cheating occurred related to the election, it would have an impact on the results of the election. We all saw the video footage from State Farm's arena. I mean, they were literally scanning ballots multiple times through the machine. Just because the Supreme Court's ruled there was no cheating, it doesn't make it true. We all witnessed it. Third, Trump being granted immunity in official acts was somehow translated to him ordering a hit on his political adversaries. This doomsday rhetoric was rooted in Trump using the Department of Justice to investigate the results of the election. And the hypocrisy of the left, right? Because Hillary Clinton and the Democrats did the very same thing in the 2016 presidential election, claiming Russia basically helped Trump win. They attempted to impeach him several times, yet there was no weaponization of the Department of Justice there. They didn't accept the results of that election neither, and used those same government agencies to investigate. So you can't cry foul when you're doing the same thing. In addition, the insurrection had very, well, let's just say peculiar individuals lurking around who were not Trump supporters. It's been proven that Antifa was there, BLM was there, and some of these individuals were revealed to be posing as Trump supporters during the insurrection. And that opens up a can of maggots. Because if those were fake Trump supporters, then What does that say about the alleged insurrection altogether? Let's just say the access into congressional chambers was a bit too easy to get into. Capitol Hill officers were seen just standing around while the mob ran all throughout the building. So, that speaks for itself. And now we have the current debacle with Old Joe. His talking points go back to all of those issues, and yet there is so much corruption surrounding his name and family. This is why he refuses to step down, despite being a literal walking corpse. He has finally obtained the power that he's been dreaming about in his 50-plus years of being a politician. He accomplished what Hillary Clinton couldn't, so he won't relinquish that power so easily, despite it being a detriment to the Democratic Party. In a way, I actually think that's poetic justice. Democrats used Old Joe as a smokescreen to hide their policies behind, slandering the orange puppet, and now they want him out of there. But the old man has become too stubborn in his position of power. You get what you asked for, so don't complain that the senior citizen is refusing to get out of the rocking chair. But let's tie it all together. Hunter was at the White House 2 days prior to the cocaine being discovered. Of course, the Secret Service played doofus, along with the administration and left-wing media. But then Hunter had been hanging around and was apparently consulting Old Joe. He was involved in staff meetings. Are you kidding me? How does he even have the credentials to attend those meetings? Just because he is family doesn't give him the right to attend staff meetings. But then again, if he has the ability to just leave cocaine baggies in the White House and nobody does anything about it, well, I guess he runs the White House, you think? Just from an ethical perspective, allowing a drug addict who has gun charges, drug possession charges, and tax evasion charges walk around in the White House attending staff meetings is disgraceful. It says a lot about the ethics of the administration.
Yeah, the radical persona of Trump is one thing, but the mainstream media can never claim his son was doing lines of cocaine in the White House. This is bonkers, right? That scandal was just as outrageous as when Bill Clinton was in office. He denied the allegations, but we all knew Monica Lewinsky was his personal secretary. He was committing these acts while being the president of the United States, with Hillary Clinton knowing what was going on. Could have been complicit with it as well. It's not just Democrats, though. Bush was also a former cocaine addict, and perhaps was still doing cocaine when he was president. He also was an alcoholic. The point here is when you become president, you are supposed to be a symbol of class, civility, and integrity, not only for the nation, but a representation of that nation to world leaders. And Hunter Biden's criminal activity had been enabled by his family, especially the man who is president of the nation. This is unacceptable, and it shouldn't have ever happened. But this goes back to the lack of respect for the position his father held. Oh, my father is president. Who cares? I'm going to party like it's 1999 in the White House. Because I know nobody has the guts to expose me for it. They'll cover it up. And this is why he has no shame in returning back to the White House, because he got away with it. His recent charges mean nothing, because that's his own boneheaded mistakes. But committing crimes in the White House and getting away with it shows how reckless Hunter is. Yet the mainstream media deflects from his behavior and crimes. And there is political weaponization of the Department of Justice, because they turned a blind eye to these crimes because of a Democratic administration. It's safe to say, if it were a Republican administration, whoever's son did that, not only would he be charged and convicted, but the Republican president could face an impeachment as well. But that's how the cookie crumbles.
Yeah, wouldn't that be a twist? Powder Nose is running things. In conclusion, while the Democrats are running around gaslighting, giving mixed signals about the decision of who will run for president, we focus on the corruption that is right in front of everyone's faces. Bernie Lomax may be an old man, but it does not exempt him from facing criminal charges, just like his spoiled son. And this tap dancing the Democrats and left-wing media are doing has to stop. You can't dance anymore. Does everyone recall the whole too old to be charged issue? Yeah, Special Counsel Robert Hur stated that he opted against bringing criminal charges against Old Joe because he would be difficult to convict, describing him as a, quote, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, unquote. Which person is in office then? An elderly man with poor memory? Or a elderly man who has the cognitive skills of a freaking dolphin? Keep in mind, Old Joe knowingly took classified documents with him after he left office in 2017, after serving as vice president. This is a crime, or so I thought. So, if he's a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, isn't this an admission he is literally too old to serve as president? Last time I checked, memory is a key quality, and memory also is linked to cognition. The mental action of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought is null and void if you can't remember any of it. So when he's facing criminal charges, he's an old man that didn't know what he was doing, although somehow they reported he, get this, knowingly took those documents. And since he wasn't vice president anymore, meaning he wasn't employed by the administration anymore, this was espionage. And this would make old Joe, well, a spy to be honest. Now, why would an old man be holding on to classified documents? Well, most of those documents were regarding military and foreign policy in Afghanistan. Now, we're not even going to get into that in this episode. But old Joe kept those documents. He literally committed espionage, which is punishable up to 10 years in prison. And why would he take those specific classified documents about the military and foreign policy in Afghanistan? Why couldn't he take one of the Oval Office books or something? I kid. See, here's why this is a major problem. Espionage is a threat to national security. That's number one. If this is done by a citizen of that nation, well, this could be classified as a form of treason. I guess the left was onto something, fear-mongering the rhetoric that Trump would have old Joe put out of his misery based on a threat to national security. It doesn't matter that old Joe sent those documents back because they could have been duplicated, or key elements of them written down. If you take classified documents with you after leaving office, those classified documents can be used against the United States in many different forms. What if old Joe gave this classified information to foreign entities as a way to undermine his political opponent? They claim Trump did it against Hillary Clinton, right? This would be a form of treason. And because old Joe was a Foreign Relations Committee chair member and then oversaw foreign policy as vice president, it becomes even more of a concern due to the potential breach of national security. What if he shared those documents with an ally, yet that got intercepted by hackers? The point is, he should actually be in prison right now, instead of running for a second term. But then again, Robert Hur executed the good old damage control, claiming he was too old to even remember he committed a crime. It reminds me of that episode on Seinfeld, where Uncle Leo was stealing books out of the library. And when caught, he played the typical senile old man who didn't know where he was. Yeah, old Joe is an old man who was confused. He didn't know what the hell he was doing. But just like Uncle Leo, he knowingly stole those books out of the library. So you can't even hold to that standard of poor memory, but through the magic pixie dust, they did it. Here's the conclusion, if you haven't figured it out. Here's what I think, which was pointed out in previous episodes. Old Joe is in fact old, but he knows exactly what he's doing. He's playing into that persona of being a mumbling, fumbling, stumbling old man. It allows him to avoid any real scrutiny based on policies, and definitely gives him a get-out-of-jail-free card. Old slick bastard. The tiger doesn't change its stripes, my friends, they just get older. Like father, like son, Powder Nose shares the same deceptive traits. I mean, everyone knows he left those cocaine baggies in the White House because he is a cocaine addict. It was discovered in an area that wasn't accessible to the public, so this means whoever left it had staff clearance. This would be either staff or someone who has access to those areas. Family members have this access. Cocaine in the White House. No big deal, says the administration. Sure, we can talk about Stormy Daniels, the grab them by the vagina comment decades ago, but the Trump administration never had cocaine baggies found in the White House. And that is a very, very, very important difference, my friends. Because it symbolizes that old Joe has enabled his son so much in his criminal activity that Powder Nose felt it was perfectly normal to ride the snow in the White House. It's a reflection of what his father thinks about that position of power. Old Joe does not truly embrace the integrity and global impact that seat of power is required to uphold. Anywho, I leave you with this. If Bernie Lomax is in fact the Democratic candidate for president, it will be the end of not only the Democratic Party, but it will draw attention to a lot of those Democratic mayors and governors as well. They're trying to allude to Kamala Harris being the next president, but her approval rating is even lower than her boss's. But then again, she is the vice president, and she is a woman of color, right? Can't deny a woman of color the opportunity to become the first woman of color to be president, right? The jam Democrats are in. They did it to themselves, though. Maybe Gavin Newsom will tiptoe into running for president? Once again, how can he jump ahead of Kamala Harris? Or what about the wacko Gretchen Whitmer? Again, none of these Democrats can overthrow Kamala Harris. So Democrats are stuck with an old man who has to get his daily naps in and a vice president who seems to be on another planet, just like Bernie Lomax. Well, this all goes back to decisions. Working so hard to fight against the orange puppet, Democrats lost themselves in the process. Now they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Or better yet, they're stuck between a senior citizen and a stoner. Yeah, she's a stoner. It's obvious. This is the chaos sector,